Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So in our today's video, I'll be answering a very important question. All right, so in one of my previous videos, a subscriber of mine reached out to me and he requested for me to create this particular video, this particular content which I will be creating today. So the essence of this video is to teach you on how to know which column to focus on, or how to start your analysis process. And when I got this request, I actually really could relate to it, because when I was starting out as a data analyst, I could remember that after getting the data set, sometimes getting a data set that has so many columns, it becomes very difficult for me to start my analysis. Like, what columns am I to focus on, what questions am I to answer? And in this video, I'll be teaching you, or I'll be guiding you the thought process on how to go about that. So if this is your first time you're coming across this YouTube channel, this is the Data Perspective channel, and my name is Favor, and all I do in this YouTube space is I teach you on how to analyze healthcare data using various data analytical tools ranging from Python, Tableau, SQL. All right, so if you are considering transitioning from your career into the data analytics career path, or you are considering becoming an healthcare data analyst, which I am, then this is your go-to YouTube channel for you to learn everything related to healthcare data analysis. And just like I said earlier, this is a video to answer a subscriber question. So you can see that you can drop your questions, you can drop your request on any of my videos. If I see it and I can answer your question, then I'll make sure I go ahead and create a video to answer that question if it is necessary, or give you a reply. All right, so without wasting time, let's go ahead and tackle this. So to tackle this question, we'll be doing it in two parts, because if we can go through the question, I can easily break this into two parts. The first thing is understanding which column you want to focus on your analysis, right? That's the first one. And the second thing is, it finds it difficult in creating dashboard, like knowing the questions to answers when you are creating your dashboard. Okay, so that is the two aspects we'll be looking at it. So looking at the first question, which is finding it difficult to know the columns you want to tackle in one, I'll be answering this using two ways. Okay, the first thing is, what type of project are you tackling? Okay, so is it your personal project? So it's either you're a beginner, or you're in this your learning phase and you're working on personal projects, or you're already working, or you're about working and you're thinking about, or if a client comes to me, how am I going to go ahead to tackle this client's project? Okay, so let's start with that one, tackling a client's project. So for client projects, most usually when they come to you that, oh, I want you to help me to analyze my data set, or I have these particular issues with my business, I'm trying to find a solution to it, so this is my data set, I want you to go through it. Okay, so the clients most usually in that instance tell you what is wrong, or what they think is wrong, or what they are actually trying to get from the data set. So currently I work in Upwork, and when clients reach out to me, they tell me, oh, sales have been dropping, I want to see what is affecting sales, how can we improve. So from the conversation you have with your clients, you can outline almost like 5 questions or more that you need to answer, or your client wants you to answer. So what I'm trying to say is, when you're working with clients, most likely they are going to tell you the objective, what they want you to do for them, the questions they want you to answer. Okay, and with those questions you want to answer, then you're able to get the columns you'll be using to answer your project. Then the second one is, okay, you are working on your personal project, and this one is the most, let me say, difficult one. Okay, because most of the times when you're working on personal projects, it's just going to be based on your own intuition. You're the one who's going to set those questions for yourself. Okay, what questions am I to answer from this data set? And most likely, if you don't really have a motivation, if you don't really have a guide, you find it confusing. You see that you spend a lot of time just going through the data set, but you don't really know any particular direction you are heading towards. All right, so in this situation, let me say you have a data set, you have an, for example, if you look at my screen, we have this hospital emergency room data set. All right, so I have this data set and I'm trying to work with it, but I have a whole lot of columns here. We have the date, patient ID, patient gender, patient age. At first I'll be confused. Okay, what column should I tackle? What questions should I try to answer? What, there are a whole lot of what should I do? So to solve this particular question issue, you can try and imagine, okay, because in this situation you are the data analyst that want to provide solution to the problem, right? But you need to know what the problem is. What is the problem that you are profiling solution to, right? So you can try and put yourself in a situation of, okay, if I am an hospital manager, what are those questions I would want a data analyst to answer for me? Okay, probably as a hospital manager, I might be looking at, oh, we are having wait time, a prolonged wait time in the emergency room, or we are having a lot of patients that are waiting in the emergency room. I want to know why it's happening. I want to know what patient condition, what disease condition most of these patients have. I want to know, is it that it is usually women that are more in this emergency room, or is it male? I want to know which of the gender. Do we have children more? How can we shorten this emergency? So you can see that just from assuming myself as an hospital manager, I've already outlined some questions I would love to answer. So you can make these questions your objective for the project. Okay, these are the things I want to answer from this data set. And you should bear in mind that in a data set you can have a whole lot of questions you want to answer, because an hospital manager can be thinking from one aspect. If I can say, okay, I want to act as a nurse, and these are the questions I would want to get from my data set. Okay, so these are the questions I want a data analyst to answer for me. So you can try and wear the shoe of any person in the hospital setting and see the particular questions that we want to get answers to. So once you've done that, you can now jot down those questions and make them your objective of the project. Okay, so if you're in a situation where even trying to do that, you're still finding it difficult, you don't know, okay, let me say, for example, you're coming from a field that is not in the healthcare sector, and so technically you don't know what questions an healthcare manager or a ward manager or a nurse is going to be asking, you can make use of ChatGPT. There are some projects I want to, work on, personal projects. Let me say it can be in finance, it can be in any other sector, and I would want to, put in myself in that shoe. For me to be able to put in myself in that shoe, I need to understand what that person's job role entails, right? Which I currently don't know. I can use ChatGPT to, ask, okay, I can just prompt it and say, as a bank manager or as a whatever role, what are those questions you will want a data analyst to derive from this particular data set? Okay, so it would help you to understand that particular role, and also these are what a bank manager would want to get. These are the questions an executive would want you to answer, or these are questions they will be needing answers to. So with that, you can write those as your objective, and that is what you are now going, those are the questions you are now going to be answering when you are tackling your project. All right, so that is the first one. We've answered the question of what questions or what columns are we going to be looking at. So for example, if I say I am acting as a ward manager, and the ward manager say, oh, I want to know, or what gender, percentage of gender that is visiting the emergency room more, then I should know that the column I'm focusing on is gender, right? So with your questions, in as much as you've been able to derive the questions you want to answer, it then makes it easy for you to know which particular column in your data set you will be using to answer that question. So for example, if we go through some of these questions we've written here, so how many patients are visiting the emergency room? So from this, we can be able to know that, oh, we need to count the total number of patients that are visiting the emergency room. So where can we get the patients that are visiting? We can do that by counting the patient's ID, right? So we know that this is the column we would be focusing on. So like I said earlier on, also for gender, percentages by gender, you would know that, oh, we have a column which is the patient gender, and we can now use this column to determine how many people were male, how many were female, how many said they were non-binary, and so forth. All right, so we can also, so for example, if we say what is the average wait time for patients, you can know that from that question we're looking at wait time. All right, so we can now go to the wait time column and say, okay, we want to calculate the average patient wait time of this patient. So for you to know the columns of your data set you want to use, it means you must have written down the objective, you must have written down the questions you want to answer. And from these questions you want to answer, you can now know the column in your data set that you'll be referring to answer those questions. Okay, I hope I made this easy, and I hope you're able to understand this. All right, so going to the next phase of this question is, okay, now we've known the columns we want to use in answering our questions. How do we go about it? So to do this, I'll be taking you to Tableau. All right, so most of the times when I want to create dashboard, I prefer using Tableau for creating my dashboard. So let's go to Tableau. All right, we'll be coming back to Python programming language. That's our Jupyter notebook very soon. So I just want to explain the situation of things to you using this very popular data set, which is the Superstore data set. I've already loaded that in our Tableau, and I'll just go ahead and open a new sheet. So in your data set, in any data set which is given to you, we usually have two categories of columns of data, right? We have what we call the dimensions, and we have what we call measures. All right, so when we talk about dimensions, when I say dimensions, I mean let me just go ahead and write this here. So I mean dimensions and measures. Okay, let's make this bold and let's increase the size to 26. Okay, so we have what we call dimensions and we have what we call measures. All right, so for dimensions are columns that are used to answer what in our questions. Okay, so when we are referring to dimensions, what they do is they describe categories or groups. So for example, in this data set we have categories. So if I drag this to rows, you can say we have furnitures, office supplies, and technologies. Okay, so they are just like categorical data or group of data. So for example, your customer name is a dimension, category is a dimension, your country, we have different country names, they are dimensions. We have product name, other dates like dates, region, segment. So mostly, not all tests, but mostly they are dimensions. And when we're talking about measures, we have values like the numerical values in our data set. So for example, let me go ahead and just remove this. So for example, we have discounts, number of records, profit ratios. So these are the measures in our data set. So we have the dimensions and we have the measures. So the measures are also known as the metric, and this is the same process, or they work exactly for Python as well. Okay, so if we take a look at this data set, we have the categorical data set, and we have the numerical data set as well. So we have date as dimension, patient ID is a dimension, patient gender, their dimension. We have these numbers, age, their measures, satisfaction score, their measures. Then we have patient first initial, their names. These are dimensions. These are dimensions. Okay, so I hope with this now you're able to differentiate what a dimension is from a measure. So another thing is, you can see when I was talking about the patient ID, it's, you can say, oh, this is a number, right? But this particular number, it's not a measure, right? And why is this number not a measure? This is not a number that you can make aggregation on. This is a number that is used to represent a particular a patient at this point in time. Okay, so for example, your order ID is not a measure but a dimension, because you cannot say we want to add the order IDs together, right? But you can count how many order IDs you had, but you can't sum it, right? So those are dimensions, not measures, right? So that's for dimensions and measures. So you need to know what columns in your data set are dimensions and what are measures, because this is going to, help you a lot when you are about, answering those your questions which you've already jotted at, or help you to, carry out analysis on your data set. So for example, we have, let's look at our measures. We have profit, and if I drag profit on test, you can see we have our sum of profit. Let's make this entire view, and let's increase the size of this. All right, let's make this bold and center. Okay. All right, so you can see now that if we check the sum of our profits, it gives us this value. So most of the times when we are looking at KPI values, when we're looking at bands, which are big number values, we use our measures to get those values, because most of the times we want to see how many, what's the total profit we had for a particular period of time. We can decide to say we want to get the average profit. We can change this to average and get the average profit value. We can decide to say we want to look at total sales we had. We want to look at, so these are measures. So measures are usually used, or we usually carry out aggregation on measures, and we use it to answer how much, okay, how much sales, how much profit we had, how much quantity did we sell, how much number of products did we, just use to answer how much. They're usually numerical values, and we can carry out aggregations on those columns of data. Okay, so now when we go back to dimensions are usually used to break down or give us a breakdown of our measures. So if I drag category to rows, you can now see that these are initial measure value of total sale which we had has been broken down. We can now see how much we got, sales values we got from furniture, how much sales value we got from office supply, and how much sales value we got from technology. So you can see now that adding a dimension to this measure has broken down our measure value and has given us a more detailed amount for each of those various values in our category. Okay, so we can change this to, we can decide to say, oh, we want to look at region. So let's drag region. So we can see for each region, so you can see that adding dimension to our measures gives us breakdown. Okay, so we can see for the various region, we have the amount we made for furniture, for office supplies, for technology, for east. And with this, we've already started, we've already started gathering insights from our data set. So it could be, for example, that our client has asked us, oh, we want to see which region is making more sales. Okay, so we have our data set, but we don't know which region. We have a business where we have branches in central, east, south, and west region. We don't know which region is bringing more sales to this business. We want to know which region does that. So with that questions now, we want to identify the region and we want to identify sales, right? So you now know the two columns your data set you want to use. Now all you now have to do is to identify which of this column is the dimension, which is the measure. So we know sales is measures, region is dimension. So we can now go ahead and drag this on our various feeds, and we can now say, oh, for the central region they made this, for east region they made this. Okay, so and we can go ahead and change this to a bar chart, and with this we're able to create our bar chart. So let's put this on a full view. So you can see that with this we've answered our first question, which region makes more sales. Okay, so it is very easy and straightforward. So once you know the question you are answering, from the question you want to answer, you can now determine the columns in your data set you want to use to answer that questions. And once you've determined those columns you are using to answer your question, you now ask yourself, is this column a dimension or is it a measure? So once you'll be able to answer those questions, you can now go ahead and start analyzing your data or start the analytical process. All right, so that is just that. So let's take this analogy, let's take this logic back into answering healthcare data. Okay, so as well loaded and healthcare data, which we'll also be using in our Jupyter notebook, and this is the same data, the emergency room data set. So let's say, for example, we have some questions which we've jotted out, right? So we say that our ward manager wants us to know how many patients are visiting the emergency room. All right, so from this question, how many patients are visiting the emergency room, they just want us to count the patient ID, right? So to do that, this is the same data set. I can just bring patient ID is a dimension, and the only aggregating function we can do with dimension is we can count them. We can count how many departments we have. So we can see, oh, we have these are the departments: cardiology, gastroenterology, general practice, and we can decide to say how many are they. Let's count them. So we can count it, and we can see we have 8 different departments. Okay, so we can use the count distance or count on dimensions to get how many they are. Okay, so that's most likely the aggregatory function we can do with dimensions. Okay, so in this situation we want to count how many patients we had in the emergency room, and we can drag this to test, and we can say, oh, these are all the patients, these are all the patient's IDs, right? So we want to count it. You can say we can't sum these values. We can't say we want to add 100-04- this to this. No, what you can do is you can count the values, and if we go to count, so let's count the distance, and we can say we have 9,216 patients that visited our emergency department. So let's go back, let's take this back to our Jupyter notebook. Okay, so these questions, I've actually worked on this project before, so this is it, and I also think I've posted it. I've walked you through the process on how I went about this project on YouTube. Probably I'll put the link to that particular video so you can go ahead and take a look at it. So I won't be telling you detailed process or how we went about this because we've already done that. So let's just go to what our bone of contention is for the day. So okay, so this is the finding insights from our data set, and our first question we had was how many patients are visiting the emergency room. So you can see we can just if we are answering the same questions, this same question we answered in Tableau right now, right? So if we want to answer this same question using Python, okay, so we just have to identify this is our data set, which is df, and this is the name of the column, column patient ID. So if we apply the dot count method on this, we're able to get the number of patients who visited the emergency room as 9,216. If we take a look at Jupyter Notebook, we got the same answer, which is 9,216, right? So you can see that different data analytical tool, but we are arriving at the same answer because we are answering same question. So the next question we had was, what is their percentage by gender? Okay, we've seen that this is the total number of patients that was in our emergency room, right? Now we want to see how many of them were male. Did we have more male than female? Did we have more female than male? Like, we want to answer what was the gender distribution like. Okay, so we can go ahead also and answer this question in Tableau. And if you remember, what I told you is we just have to know what question are we trying to answer, the gender distribution of this patient. So it means we are looking at the column called gender, right? So we can go ahead and is gender a dimension or a measure? Gender is a dimension, right? So if we go ahead and drag the patient gender on rows, now we can now say we have a breakdown. Okay, let me make this entire view. All right, and I'll also go ahead and increase the text size. I want this to be centered, and I want to increase the text size. All right, so we can see now that we have for female, we have this is the value. For male, this is the value. For those who were not conforming, that said, oh, I'm not a female, I'm not a male, and this is the number of patients. All right, so you can see that same process. What we just have to identify what are the columns we want to take a look at, and if we want to see this as percentage, we can go to our quick table calculation and put this as percent of total, and it gives us the various percentages. All right, so now let's answer this same question using Python programming language. What is their percentage by gender, right? So to do this is easy and straightforward. All we have to identify is what column are we referring to. We are referring to our patient gender column. So we want to count many patient ID identified as male, female, and non-conforming. So once you identify the column you are referring to, which is the patient gender, now using the dot value counts method in Python, you can now go ahead and set normalize. If you want to get just the values initially, you just have to remove normalize equals to true. So adding the normalize equals to true is going to give you the percentage of these values, just like the way we had to add a percent of total on this. All right, so if we want to clear table calculation, we are going to get the initial value. So the same thing, if you remove normalize equals to true, you are going to get the initial value. So adding normalize equals to true is just going to give you the percentages of this value. So you can see we have male as 51%, female as 48%, not conforming as 26%, which is almost reflecting. So if we take this back to percent of total, so you can see we have same value. So we can decide to re-rank this. So male 51, female 48, and not conforming at 0.26%. All right, so same thing we had here. So let's look at another question. So I hope with this you've been able to understand the process. So in as much as you've gotten your questions you want to answer, going about your analysis now makes it very easy. So for example, if you wanted to create a dashboard, you can go ahead and make this a bar. All right, let's make this a bar, and we have created like a second chart for our dashboard. Okay, so this is just like you are going about, you are answering questions. What are the questions my client wants to see, or what are the questions the ward manager wants to see, and you're not going about and you're answering those questions that you've already drafted out. Okay, so now let's take a look at another question which we had here, is what is the average wait time for patient? So for the average wait time for patient, it's same thing. If we go to our Tableau, we can say, oh, we want to see the average wait time for patient. Do we have a column that tells us about the wait time? Yes, this is the patient wait time. So, and is this column a dimension or a measure? It is a measure. It has to do with numbers, right? So we can just drag this to test, and by default, Tableau gives us the sum, but no, we don't want to see the sum of the wait time. We want to get the average wait time. So we can place this on average, and we can see that on average, patient waits for about 35 minutes, right? The patient waits for about 35 minutes on average. Let me make this bigger. Yeah, so you can see on average, a patient waits for about 35 minutes, right? So let's go to our Python notebook and see if we are going to get the same answer, the same result, okay? So let's go down and let's see if we answer that question. Oh. Okay, we had a lot of questions to answer. Like I said previously, I'll be linking a video to I'll put in a link to this video or the previous video where we talked about this project. All right, so this is the question: what is the average wait time for patients? So using the main method, you can get your average, and with this you can see what column are we referring to, the patient wait time column. So you just have to call the main method on the column. Once you've identified your column, you call the aggregate function, the right function, or you want to use on that particular column, and you're going to get your answer. It's easy and straightforward. So you can say we got 35.25, which is similar or same thing as what we got in Tableau, right? So we can take a look at the last question, which is what is the average patient satisfaction score? So you can see that with this method, technically, what are you going to do? You're going to identify the patient satisfaction score column. So you're going to go through your data set. Do we have a patient satisfaction score column? Yes, this is it, the patient SAT score. Then you're going to ask yourself, is this patient SAT score, is it a dimension or is it a measure? So you can see that it has numbers, so it is a measure. And what aggregation do we want to get? We want to get the average value, right? So if you are making use of Python, you can just say, oh, this is our data set df, we want to get the patient column, the patient satisfaction score. So we want to get this column, we can go ahead and put this there, and we want to get average. So in Python, we use main to get the average value. So once you run this, you can see now we have our average. On average, a patient's satisfaction score, a patient was 4.9, let's say 5, they gave a satisfaction score of 5 on average, right? So let's answer this the same question in Tableau, using Tableau. So you're going to ask yourself, what fields are we looking at? The patient satisfaction score, which is a measure. So let's drag this to test, and by default we are getting the sum. Now we can go ahead and change this to average. All right, so if I go ahead and make this let's make this bigger. All right, so we can say we have the 4.992 as the average score of patients, right? So you can decide to make these like our KPI values, right? So we can say this is average SAT score. All right, so we can decide to make this like what I said earlier. Most of the times measures are used as KPIs or big bang values, right? So we can just make this a KPI and say, okay, this is our average SAT score. This is this was our average patient wait time. Average wait time. All right, so we can decide to add other values as well. So we can say we want to see the total patients, patient ID, like what we did earlier. So we want to count these, and we say can count, so we can say this is the total patients we had in the emergency room, total patients. All right, we can say, oh, how many departments did we have? So we can say we want to also see the number of departments we had. Let me go ahead and make this test bigger. All right, so we can say, oh, how many departments do we have as well? So we can put this on test, and we can just go ahead and count this as well. Okay, so we can call this number of departments. All right, I can make the text bigger. All right, so with this we've gotten like let's say we've gotten like 4 or 3 big band values, right? So we can also go ahead and say, oh, I want to duplicate this, and we want to see the breakdown, the number of patients that was referred to each of these departments. Let's put let's go ahead and change. Let's go ahead and change this back to our department, and we want to see the count of patients on this. Okay, just make this faster. Count these, and I want to make this. All right, so let's sort these and put these on entire view. So you can see that we've started answering questions. So how many patients was referred? These are the number of patients that were not referred. 5,400 patients were not referred to any department. These were referred to general practice, orthopedic. So you can now start looking at the breakdown. Okay, so we can decide to any questions. In as much as we have our questions already jotted down, we can now start answering those questions based on the columns we have in our data set. And at the end of the day, you can go ahead and create a dashboard and drag this sheet on your dashboard. Okay, so I hope I've been able to answer how you can go about your data analysis process. And same thing with your Jupyter notebook, or same thing with Python. Once you have those, if you take a look at this notebook, you can see that each questions were duly answered. Wait time of patients in the emergency department monthly. We went ahead to look at the months, the various months in the year, and we look at the average wait time. So we can now see which particular months in the year did we have a prolonged wait time, or which particular day in the month of the year did we have a prolonged wait time. We even went ahead to plot a line graph and so forth. So this is just a straightforward process. This is how you go about your data analysis. Okay, so put in mind that this is aside you cleaning your data, because the first thing you have to do when you get your data set is you have to do data cleaning, which we've done already at the beginning of this project. So you can see we inspected our data set, we did data cleaning, or we checked at the column and so forth. Okay, so we did not take a look at that today. We just wanted to see how the main data analysis process go ahead. How do you know which column to focus on? How do you know or which questions to answer? And like, if I just want to reiterate, I say, how do you know the questions to answer? Most of the times when you have conversation with your clients, they are going to tell you which questions they want you to answer. What problem, you can ask them, what problem are you having? What questions, what are those insights do you want to get findings to? What questions do you want me to answer for you? Okay, you can go ahead and jot down those questions. But when you are working on your own personal projects, when there's nobody, there's no person for you to ask, or what questions do you want me to answer, and you are probably, you cannot, you are the one who is now going to go on your own self and say, okay, let me put myself in the shoes of a ward manager, of a nurse, or of my stakeholder, and see what questions likely would they want to answer. But if you find it difficult, even when you're putting yourself in that shoe, you still don't know the questions to answer, probably because you are not used to that field. Like I said, you can use ChatGPT and it will generate questions for you to answer, especially when you are going through the learning phase, when you are creating project. But when you are going through the work phase, ask your client, what are those questions you want me to answer? Interact with your client. From conversations, you are going to know the questions they are finding issues in their businesses. All right, then if you are in the hospital field, let's say you are a healthcare data analyst in the hospital field, you can ask the ward manager, you can ask the nurse, you can interact and say, oh, what's the problem, what issue are people having in this ward, what likely questions would you want to answer? Okay, so you have to interact with them, and from there you are going to get those questions you want to answer. Then once you've gotten the questions you want to answer, from the question, there is those questions, you are going to know which column in the data set you are going to be using to answer your question. There's going to be some questions you will need to answer, and the particular column is not going to be in the data set, but you can use a column in the data set to derive that particular column. That's why you now have creating calculated field, or creating columns using an already existing column in your data set. Okay, so that is just the straightforward process for you to go about your data analysis. I hope I was able to explain to you in a simple and understandable form. If you have any more questions to ask, you can always drop your questions and your comments in the comment section, and please ensure to give this video a thumbs up if you feel I was able to explain in a way that you could understand. And if you find this video helpful to you, do ensure to give this video a thumbs up. Okay, so ensure to subscribe to my YouTube channel as well. Like I said, if you are transitioning from any career path into the healthcare data analysis career path, then this YouTube channel should be your go-to channel for learning anything related to healthcare data analysis. So ensure to subscribe to this YouTube channel and share this video to your friends and loved ones you know are interested in learning how to analyze healthcare data. All right guys, bye for now and see you in my next video.